That's the committee. That's the Committee on Political Education. And we're here to screen candidates for the St. Paul City Council Ward 4 special election. We're going to get started right away. And our very first thing is we're going to go around and do quick, short introductions. We go by different names in different spaces, and we want to address everyone by their preferred names and pronounce them correctly. So before really starting the screening, we're just going to have everyone introduce themselves by saying their name, your pronouns, a quick description of your connection to SPPS, like not even a full sentence, just a bullet point, and share how you'd like to be addressed, if it's by a certain title or a certain way. And I'll just go first, and then I'll cue people to go next. So my name is Sarah Bush. My pronouns are she, her. I am the chair of SPFE COPE. I am the elementary science specialist at Horace Mann Elementary, and I am a parent of 2 SPPS students. And you're welcome to call me Sarah here. And I will pass to another COPE member, Kathleen.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Walsh. I am a kindergarten teacher at Hamlin, have been there many years, and my 2 children spent some of their time at Hancock when it was Hancock, and member of the COPE committee and a union steward. I will pass it to Jill. Oh, sorry, she, her pronouns, and you can call me Kathleen.
Hi, my name is Jill Van Koolwijk, and you can call me Jill, she, her. I work also at Hamlin Elementary School, and I have 3 children who graduated from Central High School. And I'm currently part of the COPE committee and also the Immigration Defense Committee with SPFE. And I will pass it on to Lynn.
I'm going to hold off and I'll go after everybody goes. Alex, do you want to jump in?
Alex Ford, I work at Capitol Hill. I've got 2 students in St. Paul schools, and I'm also a union steward and COPE member, and you can call me Alex, he, him pronouns. Who's next?
Mercedes.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mercedes Lee. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a 3rd grade teacher, going to be a 5th grade teacher next year at Highland Park Elementary, and I'm a COPE committee member. I will pass to Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Herman Hill. I'm an EL teacher at Washington High School, and I am also a member of the COPE committee and a union steward and a member of the EL PIC committee. And I use she, her pronouns, and you can call me Christy.
Quentin, are you ready to come up to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So hi, I am Quentin. I use he, him pronouns. I am a kindergarten teacher at Maxfield. I'm also a coach in the district at Hidden River Middle School. And I'm a 2nd generation St. Paul Public School teacher and SPFE member. Yeah, and call me Quentin. Is that all of our members? So just pass it back to you, Lynn.
We'll go to Leah next.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Leah Van Dasser. I'm a middle school English teacher. I'm released as president of SPFE. I use she, her pronouns, and you can call me Leah.
Thank you. We'll go to the candidates, Chantel.
My name is Chantel Allen. I've been a student, I've been a parent, I've been a para, I've worked in community ed. I did probably about 18 years in St. Paul schools as a worker and 5 years on the school board.
Chantel, would you like to be referred to as like with a title or just as Chantel?
Just Chantel, please.
Thank you. Cool.
Sure. My name is Cole Hansen, he, him. I am a proud parent of a St. Paul Public Schools kindergartner over at Adams Elementary. Let's see, lived in the Midway on and off for almost 15 years now. My dad went to Hancock Elementary, but I grew up on the farm up in Cambridge Township. So I got a lot of the new city experience with some of the old stories too growing up. So I'm very excited to be here with you all today. Oh, and I'm an educator at the University of Minnesota in public health nutrition. So I do community ed. Thanks.
All right. And Cole, is there a way you'd like to be called? Mr. Hanson, Cole, what do you prefer?
Cole is fine.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Molly, would you like to go next?
Hi, everybody. Molly Coleman, she, her pronouns. Molly is great. Grew up in St. Paul Public Schools, graduated class of 2010 from Central High School, and now not yet a public school parent. My son is in ECFE, and in 3.5 years will be a St. Paul Public School parent. Really excited to be here.
Thank you. And we'll go to Lynn.
Okay, so hey everybody, I'm Lynn Bolton. I use she, her pronouns. You can absolutely call me Lynn. You can call me just about anything except late for dinner, because I don't miss a meal. I am the political organizer for St. Paul Federation of Educators. I am going to be your sort of timekeeper-ish. We will try not to have to use big buzzer sounds or anything like that. Please do your best to keep your responses to 2 minutes. If things go awry, then I will jump in and tell folks to wind it up. Just for housekeeping purposes, when we're finished with the screening, we will kick you out because we are going to talk about you. The COPE committee makes their recommendations to the SPFE executive board, who has the final say. COPE makes their decisions by consensus, so it's all or nothing kind of endorsement from our folks. And I think I have everybody's phone number, so this will go to our executive board on Monday, and I will be reaching out with to all of you on Monday to let you know how things go. We'll give you all the details. And I think that's it, Sarah. So I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right, thank you. I want to thank the candidates for being here and for just putting your name in the hat to run for public office. That's part of a wonderful democracy. We're going to start, and for the first question, we're going to go in the order Chantel, Cole, Molly. I know it can be hard to keep track of that on Zoom, so I'll just let you know as we go. Our very first question is, where and who did you shadow, and what did you learn?
That's funny. So I actually shadowed a couple Sarahs. So I came in the building and I said, I'm here to shadow Sarah. And they directed me to Sarah Johnson's room, which was great. I got to do morning meeting and a lot of good stuff with her. And then I realized, oops, I'm in the wrong Sarah's room. And so they kind of moved me over to Sarah Bosch's room. Am I saying that right?
It's pronounced Bush because my family's Dutch and not German, but yeah,
Okay.
Bush.
So
I know, but it's not
I was
spelled.
moved to Sarah Bush's room, which was great. It was a science room. And one of the things that I learned, because I was asking a few questions, and specifically around the literacy trainings that the teachers were going through, because it was so rigorous last year, was one, did you make it through? And then two, what are your thoughts after it's all done? And I was happy to hear that that one, they felt good about completing the literacy training. I think it was really important that we get started at focusing on literacy in our public schools. I think that plays a role in what we see out in community around criminalization and crime. And so I love that our school district is moving to this hyper focus of literacy and making sure that all of our students can read. And one of the things that I learned is that it's rigorous, it's too much for 1 year, and that it's rewarding, but the person that I spoke to in the preliminary test tested at like 80 or 90% for that. And so even for it to be rigorous for her, and she knew a lot of the material was a lot, in that we need to, as we're implementing things, no matter how urgent it is, we have to take into consideration how this rolls out with the people. This was a state mandate, so it was kind of like, this is what we had to do. But just thinking about that in a lot of system ways of how we can make sure that we get the information to the people that are on the ground doing the work. in a way that is effective. And so that was one of the biggest things I learned. And I also learned that Miss Bush does a lot of really community service work, which you guys know that's my favorite thing. So we were out cleaning gutters and getting things, just science and relating it to everyday use and their impacts around what they see. And I think that that's really important in making education relevant. And then to see how they were actually cleaning up our community at the same time was beautiful, and giving them thoughts about that. So those are a couple things that I learned.
Thank you. Cole? Oh, I can
Yeah,
repeat.
so
You got it? Okay.
okay. Great. So yeah, so I shadowed with Mr. Quentin over at Maxfield, which was a lot of fun because when I lived at Central and Dale for some time, Maxfield was the school that I would take my daughter to learn how to walk and learn how to play in the playground. So it was very fun because back then the playground was, it was older equipment, and it has all been refreshed and changed over to some newer, more accessible stuff since I was last there, which is really great. And in sitting with Quentin, I mean, it's a kindergarten class at the end of the year. So the kids are antsy, kids are restless. But I could see a lot of the work that Quentin has done to really adapt and meet the kids where they're coming from. I'm always surprised to see the age spread in a classroom. I previously, for a little time, I was a debate coach at Cap Hill for Model UN. And even then, in the higher grades, you can still see a lot of variation that people don't necessarily expect. And seeing how Quentin would adapt to that, whether it was using softer lighting because the overheads were really harsh, that's the sort of stuff I noticed, but also just approaches to, discipline and challenges in behavior. Kids who are maybe having a tough time with their social emotional learning, making sure literacy is on track, even though they may have transferred in from a charter and their skills aren't where they should be. Quentin was really hitting the nail on the head with these kids. He was doing a really good job. Also, being somebody who observed a lot, I did notice how many structural challenges there are teaching in a school like Maxfield. I talked about this with Chantel before, but the building being so close to 94 and the kids having a higher propensity of asthma is no accident, right? So they have the HVAC system there to help filter the air, but it's an older building. So air conditioning and actually taking care of the whole building is a challenge. I think there's a lot of room to work together as a partnership, and improving building infrastructure in the fields is a big piece of that conversation I look forward to having.
Thank you, Cole. Molly, and I'll try to repeat the questions for you. Where and who did you shadow, and what did you learn?
Awesome. So I shadowed Mrs. Walsh's kindergarten class at Hamlin. I learned a lot about how to read in English. The power E was one thing that we were working on that day. So turning cut into cute by adding an E at the end. It's like, oh, the power E. Also, the two long U pronunciations in English, which did not know. So I was like, great, I'm learning a lot about how to teach my son how to read in a couple of years. So that was very helpful. On a more serious, more relevant note, so like I said, I graduated from public schools here in St. Paul 15 years ago. I worked in public schools in New York for 3 years, but it's been eight years since I was working in public schools full time, and it was really quite a lot to learn about the challenges that have been facing the district and facing the students. Kathleen shared with me that of the, I think, 19 students in her class, 6 have IEPs, 2 more are being evaluated. Students are having a really hard time. And these were kindergarteners. They weren't in school. They didn't have that explicit learning loss from COVID, but clearly the pandemic, just all of the social, societal challenges that we've experienced over the last few years are coming to play in that classroom and with those students. And it is obvious that it is making the job of educating even harder than it was when I was a St. Paul public school student. And one of the things that really has stuck with me, we were going into the 3-day weekend. I was like, oh, I bet the students are super excited about 3-day weekend and it's almost summer. And one thing that Kathleen shared with me is that a number of these students don't look forward to 3-day weekends, and they don't look forward to summers or to breaks from school because school is their source of stability. School is a safe space for them in a world that does not feel safe and does not feel stable. And it hit me. I've been thinking about that a lot. And thinking about how much of when we let other aspects of our society fail, when we don't provide housing, when we don't provide support for our families, for our students, that all comes to play in the classroom, and teachers are then the ones who are having to accommodate for all of those cracks in our society. And it was very apparent in that classroom that we have a lot of work to do to better support our students and families. I guess to end on a more positive note, I also learned that kindergartners are still into Harry Potter. So the first question I was asked was like, "Oh, Miss Coleman, do you know about Harry Potter?" And I was like, "Yeah, do you guys know about Harry Potter?" So even with the challenges, just felt really, the students are amazing. They're so incredible and lovely and welcoming, and it made me excited about the future of our city, but also made clear how much work we have to do.
Thank you. For our second question, we'll go this time Cole, Molly, Chantel. And this is a yes or no question, and it was not shared ahead of time, so I'll read it to you right now. Yes or no, St. Paul Public Schools is facing a significant deficit. Will you endorse, support, and campaign for a funding referendum if SPPS places it on the November ballot? And we'll start with Cole.
That's an easy yes.
Thank you. Molly?
Yes.
Thank you. Chantel?
Yes.
Thank you. Heading on to question 3. This time we'll go Molly, Chantel, Cole. What will be your top priority to work on as a council member? Please be specific in identifying your top priority and how you will address it. And this time we're starting with Molly.
So my top priority on the council is economic justice. My better part of the last decade, I've spent in economic justice work, and really have been motivated to run by thinking about what does it look like to build true economic justice in the city of St. Paul. So how are we raising the floor for all of the workers in our city? That means, passing ordinances that raise the floor through more supports, more benefits, higher salaries for all workers in the city of St. Paul, but also thinking about how do we enforce those workplace rights through administrative citations and other tools. How do we support our city employees? How do we support all of the workers who are, doing the job of making our city run? So there's kind of how do we raise the floor for people? Then how do we bring down costs? How do we make our city more affordable? We hear over and over again, every time I'm on the doors or out in the community, people are talking about how the cost of living is too high. Property taxes are going up, rent is going up, people can't afford their lives. So we need to increase housing, bring down housing costs, find other ways to support people so they can afford to stay in their homes, whether they rent or own, invest in public infrastructure so that people don't have to own a car, which is incredibly expensive in order to get around, but can get around safely by more affordable means. And then when we think about building an economically just city, how do we bring in the investment in the city that we need in order to be able to fund all of the work, all of the social progress that we need? So right now we know that we have a shrinking tax base, but we have more need than ever for public spending, public dollars. We have to grow our tax base so that we can spend more on the things that we value and really put our money where our mouth is in the city of St. Paul. So that's the framework through which I view kind of all of the work of the city council is, are we moving us closer to an economically just city? What can we be doing to get us closer to that ultimate goal? And how do we think about it broadly and comprehensively and everything that impacts the economic realities of people's lives here in St. Paul?
Thank you, Molly. We're going to go to Chantel, and the question is, what is your top priority as a city council member?
I mean, mine is very similar to Molly's, but mine is coming from a little bit different perspective. And so, whereas I'm here to support the referendum because I recognize without a referendum where our public schools will be. I know that that cannot be the long game for supporting public schools in the city. And so one of the things that, was really concerning to me was definitely taxes. My mom owns her home and she's about to retire in January. And so she's been complaining about the high taxes. And then here comes the referendum. And I'm like, well, Mom, listen, this is what's going to happen. But we need to figure out another way to generate tax revenue in this city that isn't necessarily just on the homeowners. And when I think about like when I go shopping, I'm a big and tall person, but when I go shopping, I'm in Roseville, I'm in Maplewood, I'm in Woodbury, Maple Grove. And while I'm there, I'm getting food, I'm getting gas, I'm stopping at Costco. I'm dropping all of my tax dollars in other cities. I'm not the only person that does that. And so how do we start to create, and not necessarily around clothes and that kind of thing, but how do we start to create a city that draws the other outside city folks into our city for the weekend? Draws people into our city to spend their tax dollars and drop their money here. And when I think about, other big cities across the country, the heart of the city is centered in culture. We have 144 languages in St. Paul schools. And so that tells me we're sitting on a pot of gold of culture that we can push out through small businesses in our city and provide those resources for folks to be able to spend their tax dollars here. And so that's my number one priority.
Thank you, Chantel. We'll go to Cole, and the question is, what will be your top priority as a city council member?
Sure. So I am really invested in a back to basics approach, rebuilding confidence in municipal government and partnerships across the city to make that happen. I'm the incoming chair of my bargaining unit at the University of Minnesota for civil service. And so I've seen how those sorts of relationships really matter for implementing public health and public education outcomes. The biggest thing for me is focusing on funding and how we're going to bring everybody to the table. In our city, we have a lot of state of Minnesota office buildings. We have a lot of nonprofits. It's been very good to be a nonprofit or non-tax-paying entity in St. Paul for a long time. And for me, I don't see any way for our city to move forward or St. Paul Public Schools when it's facing a $37 million budget shortfall coming up. If we don't talk about programs like pilot payment in lieu of taxes. We really need to set the table for all these organizations across the city to come and contribute, take a full what's good for the goose is good for the gander approach. Because at the end of the day, St. Thomas, Macalester, Hamlin University, Wilder, the state of Minnesota, they all benefit from our investments in infrastructure, our investments in our police and fire, and most importantly, in this conversation, our investments in public schooling, and public education. So making sure that they're brought to the table to help pay for these things is really important to me. I think we need a city that, and we need to focus on systems that allow everybody to contribute. And I believe that if we set up these systems first, we set the table, organizations will come, because if St. Thomas contributed maybe even $100,000 a year, a very small amount, that's an FTE for our libraries. And how many times have we had our libraries closed because they don't have staff, right? This is a conversation that I want to use to kind of guide the city and the schools together, because I think there's a lot of opportunity to not just look at pilot for our city, but in partnership with the school district as well. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go on to question 4. And for question 4, we'll go in order of Chantel, Cole, and Molly. And the question 4 is a little bit longer, but I'll happily repeat it for people as we go. Public education is under attack by privatizers and has been for decades. While our district has much work to do to repair the harms caused by the systems of oppression, the city and the state have created an environment that has allowed for rampant charter school expansion. In St. Paul, we currently have more student seats available than there are students, and still more charter schools are scheduled to open. Charter schools have played a large role in resegregating our neighborhoods and our public schools. Specifically, what steps will you take as a council member to slow charter school growth in St. Paul? And we'll start with Chantel.
I'm gonna just keep it real simple. I mean, we need to, one, I want to halt it. So zoning is really important. So I wouldn't allow any other charter schools to be built in the city of St. Paul right now. I would also work with MDE to make sure that the charter schools that exist are adhering to all of the rules and things around education. Sorry, I'm stuttering things outside the window. I need to close my blinds. um, but yeah, I would make sure that I worked with MDE to make sure that they're upholding all the standards in their schools and the things that they're supposed to be doing. And if not, then we need to close them down. The city of St. Paul has to produce educated people, humans, right? And if we have charter schools that are not doing the job, then we need to close those charter schools down. And I'm very adamant about that. I've always been kind of on the border because you guys know I'm really into culture and cultural relevance, and I recognize that charter schools were providing a lot of that for our communities and our city prior to me being on the board. But I honestly feel like the work that has been being done with our teachers and then also with our programs in St. Paul schools provides enough culture that if we could just get the students to come back to St. Paul public schools, we could actually provide the right resources and expand those programs and service all of the students in St. Paul that really want to be in those type of cultural programs. And so previously I was kind of like, can public schools do what is necessary? And do we need charter schools to be able to uphold that? I don't know if we do. I think our public schools can actually provide the education that's necessary for the city of St. Paul. Do I want to completely eliminate all charters? No. Of course, we need some alternatives, right? And we need alternative spaces for alternative thinkers and alternative learners. And so I don't want to eliminate all charter schools, but I do definitely want to reduce the number of charter schools that we have in our city right now.
Thank you, Chantel. We're going to go to Cole next, and I'll just repeat the last part of the question. Specifically, what steps will you take as a council member to slow charter school growth in St. Paul?
Sure. So personally speaking, I have always been opposed to charter schools. I grew up in a small community where we had our, high school everybody came to, and then a charter school opened, and I saw the difference in how my friends, when we went to sports activities or we'd get together, the difference in their education, what was going on back in high school. So I've always been a skeptic, proud skeptic of the charter school system. And I'll be honest, I've seen the damage it's done in our city too, whether that's to racial equity, whether that's to neighborhood continuity, or just the financial damage where these charter schools literally steal people's money, like the college prep along Snelling and Como did. So I think that number one, zoning and planning, yes, that's a first place to go. Make it physically more challenging to put these in our city. That feels like a pretty straight away sort of process. But I want to be creative with addressing these challenges too. And part of that means just holding these schools to the same standards that we would any other employer in this city. That means a prevailing wage for educators in our city. I believe we need to consider a prevailing wage for educators in our city based on the sorts of contract rates that St. Paul Federation Educators is receiving and winning at the bargaining table with St. Paul Public Schools. I think there are ways to navigate this so that way there are more and more ways to hold these schools accountable to the same sorts of standards that everyone else is being held to when they're a publicly funded institution, and a wage that is set, a wage that is standardized, so that these charter schools are not getting a deal or a discount on their educators. They're facing the same challenges that we are, is just putting them in the same set of challenges that we are. But we have the advantage of being democratically controlled. We have the advantage of working with our neighbors, with our community members. And I believe whether it's zoning, whether it's looking at a prevailing wage, or simply just leaning into the strengths we already have, I've really come to love my daughter being able to go to a magnet school focused on Spanish immersion. I think there's lots of options and models that we're already doing really well at. We just need to lean into those things and try a few new things too along the way.
Thank you, Cole. We're going to go to Molly, and the question is specifically, what steps will you take as a council member to slow charter school growth in St. Paul?
So the problem with going third is I think so many good things have already come out. I think clearly we need to stop charter school growth. That should be a top priority for the city council. It's something that is really it's so hard when we're talking about education. What is in the power of the council? What isn't in the power of the council? Stopping charter school growth is clearly something that the St. Paul City Council has the power to do through zoning, through a moratorium on charter school development in the city of St. Paul. So those are very obvious places to start. I think the other thing that really want to emphasize that I think Chantel said is making sure that our charter schools that we do have in the city are being held to the extent possible, to the same rules, the same standards and expectations of our public schools. Just again, as others have mentioned, getting them on that even playing field to the extent possible. I really appreciated in the questionnaire, the question about doing a citywide study of the impact of charter schools. I think that there's a real need, it's already come out in this conversation. People aren't always there. People don't always understand the impact that charter school development and growth has on our city, on racial equity, on the learning outcomes for our students, on the resegregation of our society. And I think it's really essential that we bring the community along with us, help people to see why both at a structural level and also at an individual level, we need to move away from charters. We need to come back to our public school model. I really appreciate what others have mentioned about how much we can do within that public school model, how we can do the cultural competence work, how we can I went to Adams. I went to a public school where I spoke only Spanish. That's an incredible thing that I think it's important to invest in that type of model so people see that you don't need to leave our school district to get, that language education, to get that culturally competent education, but that we can actually do that here in SPPS. The flip side, right? So we need to slow or end the growth of charter schools. And then on the flip side, I think we need to do more to bring people back into the fold of St. Paul Public Schools. So just talked about some of that. I think that really being public champions for our public schools, talking about the value that they bring both to individual students, families, and our society as a whole is essential. Ensuring that we're raising the revenue that we need, bringing the investment into the city of St. Paul so that we can put that investment back into our public schools. And we know that the city has an outsized impact on how our tax base develops. And so making sure that we're prioritizing that as a way to improve the resources available to our public schools, making them more desirable for parents, for families, for students. And I think just going back to where I started about all of the ways in which the environment that we are creating in our city impacts how students are showing up in schools, what our public schools are being asked to do. The more that we can do to support families outside of school and ensure that when students enter the building, they are able to learn, they have what they need in order to allow our teachers to educate and not have our teachers also have to worry about how do we get our families into supportive housing? How do we provide all these additional resources? That will strengthen the outcomes in our public schools. It will make the experience for students and families stronger. And I think it will ultimately help move us towards a place where more people are coming back to our public schools here in St. Paul.
Thank you. We're going to go on to question 5. And for question 5, it goes Cole, Molly, Chantel. And this is question 5. What is your understanding of co-governance and people-centered democracy? People share specific examples of what this can look like at the city council level. I'm sorry, not people. Please share specific examples of what this can look like at the city council level, especially in areas that are not policy-centered, such as street maintenance, garbage, and recycling, or public worker contract agreements. And we will start with Cole.
Thank you. So this is a key part of my back to basics approach I want to talk about, because co-governance just means that government is not working just for people, but it's working with them alongside them. It's really democratizing what we're trying to do. And so when I think about this, I think about my neighborhood organizing and the difference I've seen between communities that have a relationship and know how to communicate their needs, their values, their concerns to the city, as opposed to those that don't. Maybe they feel disenfranchised, or they're simply not organized in a way that the city is prepared to listen to them. Street maintenance is a good one, right? So there are parts of our city that have coordinated campaigns and have worked together at the district council level to report broken sidewalks, to report challenges with bad landlords. And there are other parts of the city that have not. And you can see the difference in the physical infrastructure between how these different communities are actually responding and engaging with their local district councils, but also the government as a whole in the city. Another example is this waste and recycling challenge. I was extremely frustrated to see the whole Fort Road District Council's neighborhood plan just not considered from jump when considering where to put these trash trucks, because that is an effort, a real considered and deliberate effort by neighbors, paid for by the city, in fact, to actually figure out how to do this co-governance, provide the city with the resources to say, this is what neighbors want. This is what they're really trying to do. So for me, it's not just, how are we handling issues like illegal dumping in the community? Or how are we dealing with what kind of processes are here or there? It's how do we bring everybody to the table? And that's union leaders, that's talking about community leaders, that's talking about faith leaders, and that's talking about everyday working people who struggle to make it to these community meetings, but might be able to help if you reach out on the phone, if you make yourself available. And that's something I intend to do as a council member, is intentionally and quite frustratingly be as many places as I can to collect that input so we can bring everybody in the city to the table, whether it's the bargaining table or the city council table. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. We're going to go to Molly, and the question is, what is your understanding of co-governance and people-centered democracy?
So when I think about this question, when I was first, when we probably all were first exploring getting into this race right after Council President Jalali stepped down, this stat came out about Gen Z. That was that 32% of Generation Z has lost so much faith in our institutions, all institutions, that they think we should just burn them down. That is what we are dealing with. We are dealing with a crisis of faith in our democracy and our ability to collectively solve problems and make life better. That is so extreme that a third of our next generation has just given up on the project entirely. And it is one of those stats that has kept me up at night. I think it is so incredibly daunting to see that we have not shown that our democracy can actually work for people, to an extent that people are losing faith in it entirely. So co-governance, people-centered democracy to means building a democracy of, for, by the people, in which we do hard things and actually make life meaningfully better for the people in our city, in our community. I think that is hard. It is so much easier said than done to build a true co-governance model, to build a truly people-centered democracy, because decision-making is hard. Solving big problems is really challenging. And so what this looks like to me is being willing to have meaningful, regular, frequent, honest conversations early and often throughout the process to both identify what are those challenges? What are we actually seeing on the ground? What are our families? What are our educators? What are the people who work in the city of St. Paul seeing? What is and isn't working? What might a solution look like? Who do we need to have at the table in order to figure out, is this the right solution? If so, how do we get there? What are the challenges that we face and how do we overcome them? It's coming together on both strategy and sort of the tactical execution of that strategy, not just where do you want us to get, but how do we get there? It's also not saying, oh, we know where we're going, here's how you can help us get there, but it is coming together on all pieces of that puzzle in order to be true partners, to build true trust, to work through disagreements. There are going to be disagreements. We are not going to be able to govern a city the size of St. Paul and agree on everything all of the time, but it's saying, you know what? We're going to get through this. We're going to work to the best solution we possibly can. And tomorrow is another day. And we are going to still have this partnership. We're still going to have the mutual respect. We are still going to have each other's phone numbers. We will be in touch tomorrow about what comes next. I think that is so essential. And doing that with community leaders, with unions, but also with the folks, our residents, our families, our students. And then on the, specifically the streets, the garbage, recycling, those kind of day-to-day things, it's so easy to be like, well, I put a form on my website, right? Just fill out the form. If you have an issue, tell me what's wrong. We know that is not how we're going to get the feedback that we need. That's not how we're going to build the true co-governance model that we need. And it's what Cole said, you have to be in community, you have to show up. If I send out a survey to residents of Ward 4 and say, what do you want fixed? I might get some responses. But if you're actually in community, if you show up, if you're at schools, if you're at events, if you're accessible, you're going to have better conversations. You're going to get the whole story. You're going to get more perspectives. And it's really going to it's going to enable you as a council member to make significantly better decisions that prioritize the true needs of members of our community.
Thank you. We're going to go to Chantel, and I'll just repeat that. The question is, what is your understanding of co-governance and people-centered democracy?
So this is a new concept that I'm growing in. I first learned about it when I was running the first term through Take Action, and I learned about co-governance, and I immediately adopted it because it resonated with me as a tool to actually rebuild our democracy, which was a huge piece that I was concerned about. I felt like there was a huge disconnect between the people and the folks that were making decisions. And so I immediately adopted this concept and started to use it, right? By making sure that I stayed in community, making sure that I was in conversation with the people that the policy or the issues were going to impact. And I know that you guys know this. There's been a couple times where there was a policy or an issue that was coming across and we had to vote on it. And teachers were saying that I think it was around masks or immunization or something. And teachers were saying, we want this thing. And my gut was telling me that's not the right thing to do. But I knew that my role as a school board member was to represent the people. And I even stated this when I made my vote, was that this is going against my own beliefs in this situation, but I'm going to vote with the people because that's what I was elected in this seat to do. And it worked out. You know, my gut wasn't telling the truth. And I think that that's where co-governance not being a part of government has been a problem, is that people were operating with their own gut, and then those decisions were impacting the folks that the policy was rolling down on in a negative way. And so it all worked out, and I started to trust co-governance a little bit more. I have a colleague that came in and really gave me a new perspective around not just being engaged with people, right? But as we're writing policies, writing that engagement into policy, making it very clear that when I leave this space, the people who now come and govern this space will all carry co-governance based on the policy that we have implemented, and they will continue to work with people and restore our democracy, people-centered democracy. And so I'd say I'm growing in it because I had a concept in kind of my first term. My colleague has come in and given me a whole new perspective on it. And I'm sure as we continue to shape policies and I use that tool, there'll be other ways that I'll say, wait a minute, here's another opportunity where the people's voice can move into this and actually help to shape this policy or the budget or some of the things that are really important to the people. And so for me, it's a growing concept. But one thing that's really important is that I am elected to represent the people. I'm not elected to take Chantel's ideals to the seat that I'm going to, although I have a lot of ideas because I have the experience. I've lived in this city, I've worked in the school district, I've had all these, right, these concepts and ideas, but there's some things that I don't have expertise on, and I need to know to reach out to the people to get the expertise from the people before I make my own decision based on my gut.
Thank you. We're going to go on to question 6, and we'll this time go Molly, Chantel, Cole. And here's question 6. As educators, we see the impact of housing insecurity on our students. Housing insecurity is a major stressor on a child and significantly disrupts their education. How, as a city council member, will you help our students and their families access stable housing? What positive reforms have you seen in other cities that improve housing security for children that could be implemented or adapted for St. Paul? And we're starting with Molly.
Thank you. So first, I think, like many of us, very pleased to see that the council passed stronger tenant protections just a couple of weeks ago. I think that that was a good step towards ensuring stable housing for families throughout St. Paul. I don't think it was enough. I think that there is significantly more that can be done to better protect our renters. I'm a strong advocate of just cause eviction protections. I know that there's disagreement in City Hall as to the legality of that. I believe very strongly that we can enact just cause protections and we can do so in a way that will be upheld in the courts. And I think that that's the type of renter protection that can be really transformative for keeping people in their homes, keeping people in stable housing. So that's key. We also know that we currently have an 11,000 unit shortage of deeply affordable housing in the city of St. Paul. We have to close that gap. We have to be building more housing, especially affordable housing, especially deeply affordable housing. So we know the tools that the council has to do that. We can upzone, we can improve the city permitting process, we can support development of more buildings that can accommodate families, not just your 1 or 2 bedroom units, but housing units, apartments that can actually house the families that live in our city. We know that we need to expand funding for programs that work. So the Housing Trust Fund, Other programs like the rental rehab loan program and the power of home, things that help people keep their costs down when they are in their homes, whether they're renting or they own, so that they can actually continue to afford to stay in that home. And then long term, I'd like to see us working towards a social housing model where we have essentially government run housing for not just our lowest income residents, but for people across all income levels. It's a model that's been utilized in other cities across the country. It is growing in popularity. It's been really successful, and I think is the type of intervention that will be needed in order to ultimately meet the housing needs of our community. The other, final couple of things. One, we know that even with the recent changes at the council, which will hopefully drive increased housing development and the construction of the units we need, we also know that over 80% of our renters are still protected by rent stabilization. We need to continue to monitor the implementation of our rent stabilization program and ensure that it is actually working for the families it's intended to serve, and that we are keeping people in affordable housing. And then finally, I think that there are ways that we can get really creative through partnerships with the city, county, school district, other government entities. I've been looking at the Minneapolis stable home, stable schools policy, where they're really thinking creatively about what does it look like to tap into what we know about our public school students in order to better provide housing support for families, to ensure that people can not just stay in their homes, but stay in their schools and can ensure that continuity of education, educational quality. I think it's really, we don't need to look far to find creative ways to better support students and families. I'm excited to build on what we have already done well here in the city to better fund the programs that we need and to continue to investigate and develop new models.
Thank you, Molly. We're going to go to Chantel next. And the question is, how as a city council member, will you help our students and families access stable housing?
I mean, I think that we definitely need more affordable housing. I think that that's really important. I also have always felt like there hasn't been enough collaboration with the county and the schools and the city to provide wraparound services. I'm a huge supporter of community wraparound schools because I feel like we can target in on families and really provide not just housing, but the other resources that they need to sustain their housing. Oftentimes, some of those other resources are what it gets in the way of being able to pay that rent or making that rent affordable. And so I think the wraparound services, we need to do a better job at partnering at that. As you guys know, we're struggling with the Achievement Plus programs shutting down in our schools, and that really hurts my heart. And I want to look at ways that we can create real community partnerships with folks that have access to food, have access to mental health services, rental assistance, and those type of things that we know are already embedded in our system through the city, through the county, through community partners and programs. And so how do we work better creating, I always thought the Children's Collaborative was the space for this, but how do we start to work better to utilize our resources to make sure that we're supporting our future, which is our young people? And I think that the city wants to really do things like this and the county does, but how do we start to really just come together and say, here's the resources we're going to allocate towards this, and we're going to commit to it for 10 years, right? Until we know we can get ourselves out of this poverty hole. And I feel like, everybody's trying to, there's a lot of programs and stuff, but I hate to tell you that. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, as a Black woman who's been low income with 2 children in the city of St. Paul, I just have never qualified for any of the programs. I've never even been able to qualify for affordable housing in the city. And if I did qualify, the waiting list was so long that by the time I did come up on the waiting list, I no longer qualified because I had to find, additional jobs wherever, all over the place, working 5 jobs to sustain myself. And so the reality is providing those resources to support the children that we know need the support. And so how do we do that? Working with the people that have the direct relationship with the children, which are our schools and teachers.
Thank you, Chantel. We're going to go to Cole. And again, the question is, how as a city council member, will you help our students and their families access stable housing?
Sure. So housing instability it's a personal topic for me. My dad was a public employee. He got disabled on the job, and If it wasn't for the fact that the union came to protect him, we might have lost our home. And that was a real conversation we had at our dinner table. So making sure that we are putting all of our students on the right foot, making sure they have what they need and they're able to live in safe and comfortable accommodations with the families and people that they love is really important for their success. So first and foremost, as a council member, I'm looking to prevent any displacement before it happens. And as a renter myself, I believe that's important to do through a renter's bill of rights in our city. So that's a document that informs all of our renters when they sign their lease of their rights in our cities, our many tenant protections, as well as resources available to them, whether that's how do you pay your utilities when you don't have the money, whether that is where do you get your free meals during the summertime if you have kids, and what do you do if you're having trouble with your landlord, or where do you vote, those sorts of things. I also think we need to invest in that permanently affordable housing that's already been mentioned. Supporting community land trust is important for folks who don't want to live in apartment housing and they want to be first-time homeowners or they want to be homeowners. I think that's an important part of this conversation we really have it dived into. But when we consider it, I think social housing is the priority we should be investing in because it's a democratic option. We've seen it done successfully very close by in Dakota County. They have built over 1,600 units of affordable housing and market rate housing governed democratically through their CDA. So this is not a pie in the sky thing. This is something our neighbors are doing, and we can do it tomorrow. We can start these projects tomorrow. We've also seen these things be very effective, whether it's the informed targeted support of students that Minneapolis Public Schools is doing to make sure they offer the wraparound services. But also Washington, D.C. has an entire program focused on really triaging and prioritizing kids based off of risk factors so that they can get help and support and stability before they lose their housing, before they're bouncing from couch to couch. So I think there's a lot we could do. There's models around us that we can lean on both locally and across the nation. But most importantly, it's about putting families and their kids first.
Thank you, Cole. We have 2 more questions today in our screening. So we're moving on to question 7, and thank you for all these thoughtful answers we're getting. This next one will go Chantel, Cole, Molly, and here it is. In our questionnaire, we asked you about immigrant defense, LGBTQIA+, and equity. And we're not going to ask you the identical question, but today, can you share about the work you have done and the work you will do as a city council member to defend the rights of all members of the St. Paul Public School community? And we are starting with Chantel.
Well, as you guys know, I am like a deep humanitarian who believes in rights for everybody. The body that I have to walk in this world, right? And the experiences that I've had. And so I've always felt that anytime there's policies that come across that will support communities, I'm here to support that. I joke with some of my colleagues about trying to find those underground tunnels in the city of St. Paul because I know they exist. But we do need to make sure that we're revisiting all of our immigration policies and that there's security, there's definitely safety pieces in there that prevent ICE from coming in and invading our spaces. I know that when the administration turned over, our board had a conversation about making sure that we were revisiting our safety policies, making sure that all of the people at the front doors knew and understood where we stood around federal governments being in our buildings and trying to apprehend our students or parents on our grounds, and just kind of reinforcing things that I think St. Paul has really strong protections for both groups of folks. And it's just really just when we see things that are happening around the nation and we see that there's these threats coming in, making sure that we revisit those policies so that we're making adjustments based on the language that we're hearing coming forward. And I mean, I feel like we're really, really protected as long as we hold the line. Hold the line. Don't let them in. I think that, that's where it goes. And then also listening to the people. It's about co-governance. I'm not an expert on immigration policy or immigration safety or any of that, but I definitely know how to connect in with community and find out what's needed and show up at the meetings to hear directly from folks to find out what's needed. to make sure that we're making adjustments when it's time. And the LGBTQAI and equity, what is that? Oh, equity, is that Black stuff? Yeah, I don't know. You know, it falls right underneath those human rights again, I guess. And making sure that we hold the line to make sure that everybody is getting equal opportunity in the city of St. Paul around safety, around economics, and around thriving in their life, happiness and wellness. And so,
Thank you. We're gonna go to Nicole, and again, the question is, today, can you share about the work you have done and the work you will do as a city council member to defend the rights of all members of the St. Paul Public School community?
Sure. For me, equity isn't a side issue. It's a part and parcel of every conversation we have. I've had many close friends over the last few years transition to their true selves, and seeing the impact it has made on their mental health, on their well-being, on their lives. Like, how can we not be champions of people being themselves? It's exactly what we should be doing. It's the right thing to do, and it's the best thing to do. And I've taken that approach to heart. You know, I've hopped out of the, white supremacy, and being a white heterosexual male offers you a real foxhole in this battle for equity and racial justice. And I am proudly hopping out of the foxhole all the time alongside my allies at the University of Minnesota when it comes to addressing racial inequity, gender identity inequity, even just how we talk about queerness in public education spaces at the university, because so much of my work takes place in community where folks need to feel seen. They need to see their educators who look like them, sound like them, talk like them, and importantly can see them and see what they need, what they're looking for, and feel heard. So at City Hall, I'm looking to bring that same sort of level of energy, enthusiasm, support, positivity to all these conversations, especially when it's hard, especially when it's unfair and inequitable. Whether that's focusing on supporting programs like Out for Equity at SPPS, whether that's making sure we're including these racial injustice assessments as a part of legislation or ordinance creation at the city council, and just making sure that we're doing right by every child. Right, my kid is 6, or she's going to be 6 in 2 weeks. I'm practicing now, and I want to be able to make sure she has access to every opportunity in the city, no matter who she grows up into. For me, it's extremely personal, and it's the right thing to do. So I've been doing it, and I look forward to doing it in policy driven, but also just honestly candid, personal driven opportunities at City Hall.
Thank you, Cole. Molly, we're gonna go to you, and the question is, today, can you share about the work you have done and the work you will do as a city council member to defend the rights of all members of the SPPS community?
Yeah. So what I like about this question and how it talks about the work you have done is it acknowledges that the challenges we are facing maybe have taken on a different flavor in the last few months. There is a different urgency, but these are long-standing sources of inequity and exclusion in our society, and they have required big systemic change for a very long time. So the work that I have done to date has been largely focused on what is the structural reform we need at the national level in order to better serve the most vulnerable communities in the United States and not have all of our decision making centered on what works for the wealthy and already powerful. So I've done that through focusing primarily on the judiciary, thinking about how do we ensure that the third branch of government is filled with judges who understand the lived experiences of the most vulnerable members of our society, who are going to center vulnerable groups in their decision making and are going to ensure ultimately that we have the structures in place to serve our immigrants, our LGBTQIA community, communities of color, low-income communities, et cetera. And the council, you're obviously now dealing with what does this mean in 2025? How do we do this at a time when our rights are under attack like never before? And what I think St. Paul does really well is leading with our values, saying that this is a place where we welcome everybody. We are a sanctuary city. We are a place where we are proud of our trans community members and we want to uplift them. But we need to turn that rhetoric into action, and we need to make sure that those values are actually reflected both in terms of how we're spending our money, how we are making decisions about policy, who we are hearing from, what our co-governance models look like. So for me, there are a couple of different things. I think it's really looking at who are the groups that are most vulnerable right now under this administration and at this moment in our city's history, and what specific supports do they need? We know that for the LGBTQIA community, there is an immense need for more mental health support. We know that that has to be a top priority, and that schools are an excellent way to help students get young people get the mental health support that they need if we fully fund that. We know that when it comes to our immigrant community members, that the risk of deportation and attack by ICE has reached new levels. So we need to do what others have spoken about, which is make sure we're providing all of the essential education using schools as a way not just to make sure students, immigrant students and their families are protected on the school grounds, but that they have the information that they need to protect themselves and be protected by our community when they leave school for the day. I want to make sure that we are actually hearing from our community members who are most impacted. I proposed creating an advisory committee of our immigrant residents in the city to make sure that not just are we using the sanctuary city model, but how do we go further? How do we become a city that truly welcomes all people, that ensures that our city services are truly accessible, that people understand the resources available and are able to take advantage of them? We have to do all of this work, recognizing that we are in a highly politicized environment, that there are immense safety concerns, that frankly, joining a committee right now, if that committee is publicly listed, is something that is going to be too dangerous, too risky for too many people in our community. So we need to be thoughtful and creative about how we continue to get that feedback, what it looks like to bring in those advisory committees at this moment where people don't frankly want to be on a list, don't want to be publicly identified with this work or even as an immigrant in our community. But I think that if we continue to think about how do we really develop those intentional co-governance models and how do we make policy decisions that are reflective of the values that we purport to share, we will be able to actually get through this hard time and then build better long-term for immigrants, trans students, etc.
Thank you, Molly. We're coming into our last question, and I just want to say again a thank you to all the candidates taking time to focus on St. Paul Public Schools and the staff and students as you're thinking about City Council. For your closing statement, SPFE only endorses public education champions, and we do not endorse in all races. Please share why you see yourself as a public education champion and how that will impact your position as council member. And this time we will go Cole, Molly, Chantel.
Thank you. So I'm running in this race and I'm seeking your endorsement because I believe every child in St. Paul deserves a fair and strong start to their education that starts in our public schools. Like every one of you, I'm a public educator myself, and I speak with the confidence that public education, whether that's in our elementary schools or middle schools, high schools, or at our universities, that makes the difference to healthier and safer communities. And being a public health and public education champion means fighting for the entire ecosystem of what happens in our schools and outside that school door. It's not just a pipe dream to say we should address housing, we should address stability, we should make sure everybody has the right to eat. These are things that are expectations that I have for the world around us and things I will be pursuing doggedly as a future council member. And my commitment to public education isn't just words, it's not just my job. I've gone to bat for public education at the state legislature when it came to Pell reform. So all of our educators statewide, all of our public employees had the right to collectively bargain. I've worked in partnership with education advocates to push for housing, justice, and youth education initiatives. I'm the head of my bargaining unit at the University of Minnesota, where after years of fighting, we won the right for folks who lose a pregnancy while working at the University of Minnesota to take their time and take time away to manage the impacts of that on their lives. Workplace protections are real, but being a worker in education is so much more than just a day job. It is a calling. It's what you're doing with your whole life. And whether it was observing Quentin just a few days ago, showing up at my daughter's school last night for the spring carnival at Adams, volunteering, I mean, I see how much our educators are doing for everyday kids and kids who need that much more. And you all do it because it's the right thing to do. You deserve to be compensated. You deserve to be protected because that's what we do for the people who show up every day to serve our kids, serve our city, serve our community, and do it in spite of everything we are seeing today. I'm looking to continue that fight. I'm looking to protect the sorts of values we have. And I'm not just a vote you can count on. I'm a partner and a teammate too. And I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Cole. We'll go to Molly. And again, the question is for your closing statement, please share why you see yourself as a public education champion and how that will impact your position as a council member.
Thank you. And just thanks everybody for being here on a gorgeous Saturday morning. Really appreciate the time and the engagement with this race, which is so critical for the future of our city. I am running for St. Paul City Council in short because I love St. Paul. I loved growing up here. I don't think that there's a better city in the country in which to raise a family, build a life. And I want that to be true for every single member of our community. We know that that is not how everybody experiences St. Paul, and I want that to be true for everyone here. When I think about why I loved growing up here, I think about my experience in the public schools. Everything, I was looking for my public school made me t-shirt and I couldn't find it when I was getting ready for this, but everything that I am is what I learned in St. Paul Public Schools. I learned how to be a leader, how to be an innovator, how to work with people who are different than me, what it means to live in an actually multiracial, inclusive society, how we take advantage of the foundation that is laid for us to build big things. I have never felt so inspired and surrounded by so many incredible people as I did at Central High School in St. Paul Public Schools. But I know that I was able to take advantage of all of those opportunities and able to make the most of my public education here in the city of St. Paul because I came to school every day with the things I needed outside of the school building in order to learn. I came in having had a stable space to sleep. I came in well fed. I was able to participate in after school activities and take full advantage of everything offered in SPPS because I didn't have to go be a caretaker or go provide additional financial support for my family. If we are going to make sure that every single person actually gets the education that they need in the city of St. Paul, it's the job of the city council to make sure that every single student in our district can walk in ready to learn in the way that I was able to learn when I entered school growing up here. I see that as the role of the council. I see St. Paul Federation of Educators as the core partner in doing that work as we think about what is the city that we are building? How does it support our families? How does it support our young people? How does it support our workforce? And what does it look like to truly put our values into action when it comes to our belief in our public systems, our public schools specifically? I am just, it would be an honor to be endorsed by St. Paul Federation of Educators. And regardless of what happens over the next couple of days, I just can't tell you enough how much I look forward to being a partner in City Hall for many, many years to come. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. We're going to go to Chantel. And Chantel, it's for your closing statement. Please share why you see yourself as a public education champion and how that will impact your position as a council member.
So I've been in relationship with St. Paul Public Schools for about 46 years. As a student, a parent, an educator, a board member, I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, the nasty, and the great, and the excellent. And so one of the things that I always have grasped onto, because for a long time ago, I could have just deserted this whole concept, right? And just said, I'm going to work in a whole nother sector. I'm going to find another way to do the work that I do. But I truly believe in public school systems. I know that they are the foundation of building good societies. And the things that I saw that were ugly or nasty, I knew that those were things that could be altered, fixed, supported, so that we could get to a place where we could be just great and excellent. I think it's funny that Molly said she wants everybody to have the experience she had. And I will say that a lot of my great experience did happen at St. Paul Central. And it's because it's a small city inside of there where you really learn how to interact with all types of people, all types of situations, all types of conflict, and doing it in ways that is effective. And I just feel like without public schools, I mean, we can talk about what's going on in charters. They're very segregated, right? So you get one type of individual in each building. We can talk about what's happening in private schools, which they're providing, these excellent academic opportunities. But do you get the opportunity to really get to know other cultures, other people, and their experiences? When I think about education, I think about a worldview. I'm not a huge fan of IB, but I do think about a worldview. And if you're going to get a really good education, you need to have a worldview of what's happening pertaining to that particular subject, right? And the only way to get that is in a public school system. The only way to give your child, and I say this because this is why my kids went through public schools, the only way to give your child a well-rounded education is to put them through public schools. And that's why I am a public school champion. And how will that show up in as a city council member? I'm always going to support public schools. I'm always going to support the teachers in the public schools because I realize that they're the individuals that are directly connected to the outcome that we're looking for. And so how will that show up? I'll just continue to do co-governance, tapping in with different folks in the schools, making sure I'm connected to parents, children, staff, the same thing, and using that as my co-governance tool.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking time this Saturday morning to focus on, I know for our city council, there's many aspects, but we've asked you to really focus on our schools and our public schools in St. Paul. I'm going to pass to Lynn to see if she has any closing remarks.
Thank you all very much. Like I said, I will be reaching out to you all on Monday to let you know how things went. And please, if you have additional thoughts that come to mind, feel free to shoot an email our way. And I'm going to stop the recording.